Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. Got it in the end. Right, we'll cut that bit out, right? So obviously Sarah asked me to talk about shock a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of didn't really know how I would approach it or why, or what I'd be able to say about shock. I didn't really know kind of what experience I had in my life that would kind of lead me to be able to talk about shock or what shock meant or anything like that. So I started by kind of researching and doing some reading and looking at different shock things and shock tactics and all that sort of stuff. So just before I start, there are slides in here that are shocking because that's the kind of point of the talk. Keep your kids eating breakfast, please. I just by the time I kind of did my research, I came around and thought, well, I've got quite a lot of experiences in my life, and looking back through old stuff from when I was a kid, I realised actually I've got quite a lot of things I could talk about shock about. So I've kind of broken this talk down into how shock has played a part in my life and how it plays a part in all of our lives, and a little bit about how we can introduce it into our work in a slightly different way than you'd expect. So there is some grossy stuff in here. I'll try and give you some pre-warning, but if you feel a bit sick, then turn around. The first thing I thought I'd try and do was define what shock meant. So I looked at the dictionary definitions, and they were a sudden, upsetting or surprising event or experience, and a verb to cause someone to feel surprised or upset. And I kind of started thinking about those things and whether they meant exactly what I thought they meant, or whether shock can be interpreted in lots of different ways. And I think it probably can. Shock kind of means something different to everybody, really. So I kind of came up with my own definition for the purposes of this talk, which is that doing something outside the expected that makes people feel uncomfortable. That's the kind of way I define shock. So shock can be on kind of a number of different levels. It can be really extreme, or it can be quite lower down in kind of the extreme scale. But it could be just doing something expected comes as a shock. So as I said, I kind of look back at what my I look back at my childhood, and I try to think about things that might have shocked me or I might have done to shock other people. And I was going through my old kind of work with my mum, my old like artwork and drawings and stuff. And I found some things that kind of drew my attention. These are two pictures that I found. So this was 11-and-a-half-year-old Tom, not just 11. And these were two pictures or two parts of a different picture. I died in 1991 apparently, and I wrote my gravestone, and I drew pictures of people's hands being chopped off and eyes popping out and stuff. And I have no idea why I drew this stuff. There was nothing in my childhood that a very, very normal childhood, very pleasant. I had no reason to draw anything like this, but I kind of thought that I always had something in my head that I wanted to do things that were a bit weird and unexpected. So that's kind of where that definition came from. So I started early, and then I got to a teenager, and I was a bit of an awkward teenager, and I never really felt kind of normal or I wasn't like sporty, clever, or cool. So I kind of went that way that awkward teenagers do, and I kind of grew my hair really long. I started wearing long like leather coats and big boots, and I kind of naturally veered to like standing out for other reasons, and kind of creating my own reasons to stand out, even if I didn't really want. I wasn't like an extrovert. I just wanted to be seen and for people to notice me for any other reason than what I could do or what I was good at, really. So that's why I started kind of dressing up weird and just acting like a normal teenager. And that kind of led me by the time I was like 14 to heavy metal. So I got really, really into heavy metal by the time I was like 14 or 11, no, 12, 13, 14. And I thought about heavy metal, and I thought about actually, well, heavy metal is like all about shock. It's people who don't like heavy metal find the sound shocking. You know, if you listen to something really, really heavy, then people immediately go, "Ah, that's horrendous." But the imagery and the lyrics and the kind of the whole meaning behind a lot of heavy metal is also quite shocking as well. So I thought I'd just give you a quick history of heavy metal and how it's become more shocking over the years, as most things have, as I'll go on to. So the kind of first roots of heavy metal came from this guy. Chuck Berry, 1955, started doing like rock and roll, and that's basically where heavy metal comes from, is rock and roll. And obviously he's not particularly shocking, although what he was doing at the time was really revolutionary. So later on were a couple of bands that were like key points in heavy metal. Basically, they were like key cornerstones in the genre. So in the 1960s was Black Sabbath, and again, apart from the moustaches, they didn't look particularly scary. Although Ozzy obviously did that whole biting the head off a live bat on stage thing. Although no one really knows whether that was just a prank or what, but apparently gave him TB. So there was Black Sabbath, and they were kind of the first real heavy metal band out in the 70s. And they were relatively normal, although their shows were quite kind of loud and thrashy. And then this is Deep Purple. Again, moustaches horrendous, but they kind of started to wear more leather and getting a little bit more aggressive and angry. And then Judas Priest came out like a couple of years later. So I think they were obviously seeing the guys before them and thinking we need to do something that's a bit more different to make ourselves stand out. So up came the leather and chains and whips and spikes and all that sort of stuff. So that was in 1969. They formed, they kind of started to take it to the next level. Then in the 70s was Kiss, so they went a little bit further again with the whole makeup thing and the tone. Which in itself is shocking, and they kind of tried to take it that one step further, and that was generally the way that all these bands were going. They were all trying to outdo each other when it came to kind of shock and things that could surprise people. And then later on in the 70s came Iron Maiden. So actually they looked like a bunch of kind of schoolboys. They looked quite normal for a metal band. But what I thought was quite interesting about them is that although the band was quite normal and quite kind of unshocking, they were the first ones to really use imagery that was deemed as shocking. So in their kind of album covers and their design work, they introduced their character Eddie, the kind of skull guy, and he was used in pretty much every piece of artwork they produced for like 25 years. And at this point, there was no real bands using stuff like this, so it was deemed as quite shocking and kind of made them stand out. And that was all. That's all they wanted to do, was stand out, and that's the reason why they did this sort of stuff. So that was the kind of step. So that was a bit before my time. I didn't really listen to that stuff, but that's the kind of journey that it went on. But by the time I came to listening to it in the early 90s, this was one of the albums that I used to listen to all the time. If there's any metal fans from the 90s in the room, then this is an album by Slayer called Divine Intervention. And this was the album cover, and it was a kind of a bit of a seminal album for them. It was like a really standout album in that kind of period in heavy metal, and they really wanted to kind of stand out and not just for the music but for the imagery. So the inside cover was full of all sorts of crazy imagery, and when you opened the CD, the first image was this next image, which is a bit of a shocker. So it was basically they'd got someone to carve the band's name into their arm, and they were like lying in a bath in blood and stuff. And this became a real kind of talking point about the band. It was like bigger than the music in a way. And people started to do it online, and they were taking pictures, and there was all sorts of weird stuff. And it was a real kind of the first time anything like that had been seen in an album cover. Because it was normally art or made up or makeup or something like that. But that was kind of real. And that kind of led on to a real extreme kind of load of metal work and covers and things. some of them are real extreme. I didn't even bother including them because they were horrendous. I couldn't even look at myself. But later on in the 90s came Slipknot, and even if you're not a metal fan, it's likely you would have heard of Slipknot because they were kind of like the biggest band for a long time. And that was mainly, well, in the early days it was as much to do with their image as it was to do with the music. So they wore all these masks, and there was like 9 of them, so that was a shocking enough thing to see on stage, was 9 guys going a bit berserk on stage in front of you. And the masks were mostly based around horror characters, like Corey in the middle is like based on Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then there's clowns and kind of weird pig masks and things that are generally designed to be quite frightening and shocking. But this was their kind of first mainstream album. Did have another one out, but they were looking back at them now. They're quite lo-fi and like they're actually quite rubbish. Some of their masks, even though they kind of were highly thought of at the time. This was their first kind of proper music video, and if anyone will recognise, it's based on The Shining, where you've got the words that are not written backwards. And as you can see, these kind of masks were a little bit kind of lo-fi, but this music video was really, really cheaply shot. It was like the camera work is appalling. The quality of it's actually appalling as well. But it was designed just to make them stand out and to use The Shining basically as a bit of a springboard to getting popular. And they just went for kind of weird and wonderful imagery that made them stand out. So. This is then nowadays, so they've obviously got loads more money and they can buy loads more expensive masks and more expensive makeup, and it's become much more kind of, you know, it's just them now as a band, and they just do worse and worse things as they possibly can. And so this is like last year, and this is their most recent, one of their most recent music videos. So this is a clip from it where basically the music video is featuring each band member being killed in some horrific way, and this is one of the band members eating his own fingers off, and it's really, really gruesomely done. Like it's really well done for a music video. So they've just pushed it as far as they can and further and further, and each member dies in a particularly different and horrifying way. One of them rips his own face off. Two of them get stabbed to death by the rest of the team, which is really, really gory. And the other one hangs himself while she's on fire. Metal has basically got from the ridiculous and the moustachy through to the shocking and the terrifying, and it's just got worse and worse. So, and this is like the advent of online video has obviously made this possible because it never gets shown on MTV. Maybe late at night, maybe it would, but or on a music channel. But now you can watch it on YouTube. They can release basically whatever they want. So it'd just be interesting to see how much more shocking it gets over time. So that was my metal stage and my long hair and boot stage. The next stage, I went to art college, and I kind of felt immediately that I fitted in with long hair and boots and stuff. So I felt like actually I need to stand out again. So I went the long hair and went skinhead instead. And both long hair and skinhead times in my life are obviously times that I didn't allow photography, because I've got absolutely no photographs of me with a skinhead or long hair. But yeah, that's pretty much what I looked like. I looked like a little bit of a Nazi. Again, but this was kind of all designed to shock and to, in some way, I was thinking about it the other day, and I was talking to my sweet mum about why I used to do it, and she was like, "Why did you used to do it?" I have no idea, and we worked out between us that it was probably to do with being like a young bloke, like 18 or something, in this world. Sometimes I think you need to feel like you're maybe a little bit intimidating to the world, because that's a defense mechanism for, like, you know, not getting beaten up or being able to be confident when you're not very confident. So I think that was probably part of it. But whatever I could do to shock anyone into not talking to me and avoiding me would have been great. So this kind of worked its way into my design work. I'll just run you through some of my design work from university, which it was like all based on kind of stuff that I really liked. There was artwork by Dave McKean and a couple of others, and I loved that kind of real rough and ready design work. And I just used to do as much weird shit as possible and textures and stuff. And this was one from, it was like an online CV. You have to do a CV, which is basically the best representation of yourself possible. And there was like text over the top of it and stuff. And we had to choose a phobia, so most people did a phobia of bees or coffee or something. I did the phobia of death, which is necrophobia. And these were like some of the graphics that I did around that phobia. And I just set fire to it and spray painted it and stabbed it and things. And this was another one. And then this was I found this on the weekend. We had to design, I don't know what it was, a poster for, I had to write lyrics or something, and I wrote lyrics. I'm not going to bring the lyrics. But I basically just got a piece of paper and nailed it to a big block of wood. And I've still got the big block of wood. And I thought it was pretty cool at the time. But it was totally different to what everyone else in my class was doing, and everyone else in my year was doing. They were all doing quite normal things, like normal people do. But I just didn't want to do any of those things, and I just wanted to do something that was a bit more weird. So we had a very fine gent called Alex, who's sitting over there, who came in, and he was like a guest lecturer for a project, and this was some shots from the project. I haven't got that much evidence of that project. But basically, Alex was working at Excel Recordings, and he came in and told us all about his amazing life as a rockstar designer, or probably a ninja, you'd be called now. He became a bit of a hero because I loved everything he did, and I just wanted to do something that impressed him. So we had to do this set of posters that was based on words that he gave us, and one of them was cutting edge, and one of them was individual, I think. So over on this side, which you can see on my screen, but not on this one, there's a nail that's like not rusty, basically, and that was like an individual thing. And then this one was a block of ice that I filled with razor blades and nails, and then smashed up with a hammer. I took a hammer, took a photograph of it to represent cutting edge. And then I think I spray painted the silver as well. But that was the sort of stuff that I tried out and used to do. And I don't think I actually heard this quote, but apparently Alex said that if he didn't give you his solution, he would take the shit out of it. And that was, I think, partly to do with my work, but also partly to do with the fact that I had a skinhead and wore a long jacket and boots and stuff. So obviously a little bit scared. Although hopefully by that point he got to know me and know I'd been
You were quite frightened.
So that was my kind of experience throughout my early years, really, of shock and how it fed into who I am, I guess. Terrifying thought. So I thought about how shock is used in other ways, and obviously art is one way that for years has been used to kind of create shock and impact, and people have been telling messages through art for years in all different mediums. So I did a bit of research into what constitutes shock within art, and one of the first shocking pieces of art that I found was Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling paintings, and obviously this is ridiculously early, it's the 1500s. And this was an amazing piece of work, obviously, still lauded as like one of the greatest pieces of art in the world. But it actually caused a massive amount of uproar, especially in the kind of in the Pope's kind of network. And basically the Pope's mass assemblies went ballistic about it because it featured loads of nudity, and it was obviously a huge piece of art on the ceiling of a church, and it was seen as blasphemous and shocking and insulting and stuff. So there was massive uproar. So Michelangelo, to give a nod to this guy who really complained about it, he included in the picture this guy with donkey ears, being dragged into hell with his genitals being eaten by snakes. And in the picture that appears, and that was his that was a typical artist's thing to do, wasn't it? He could have painted some bikinis on or something, but he didn't. He was like, no, screw you, I'm gonna really make it even more shocking, and I'm gonna screw you over. So that's what he did. Another shocking piece of art is this, which is it's like the first impressionist painting that caused a real reverberate an amount of shock around the art world. So this is one. It's called Olympia by Edvard Monet. Manet, sorry. It was kind of deemed as shocking initially, just because it was kind of nudity, and that was a little bit new, although they've been painting nudes for years. But the story behind the picture came out, and that's what kind of caused even more controversy. And it turned out that it was based on a prostitute and she was a prostitute, and she basically had a slave who was like delivering flowers on behalf of a client, and it was that setup of, it's not just a normal picture of a woman lying on a bed being given flowers. There's a real backstory behind it, and that caused shock amongst the art community that this sort of scene was depicted when it wasn't really ever talked about, that sort of thing. It was never kind of shown, especially in art. So kind of created a bit of a stir. So that was kind of early examples of art that shocked people. And again, like, you wouldn't really see that as a shocking piece of art now, but you know, back then it was. To modern day, there's obviously things are being pushed even further, boundaries are being pushed even further, and there are now pieces of art like this one. So this is a piece called Self by Mark Quinn, who basically every 5 years takes 4.5 litres of his own blood and makes a cast out of his own head with it. So they're all frozen in these kind of boxes, and he's going to do that, he says, until he dies, and it's just going to be a lasting kind of legacy of him as a person, but also his art. But the whole idea of it being in his own blood means that if they defrost, then they'll just all disappear with a squidge. And that's kind of the way that people are trying to create shock in art now, is to do something that is really, thinking outside the box is pretty different. Obviously, Damien Hirst was like was a big kind of proponent in taking shock into the art scene with his kind of split animals and animals in formaldehyde. That caused, I'm sure if you remember, it caused a huge amount of shock in all parts of life, really. I mean, it was the first time in a long time that modern art had really made the news and created a bit of a stir. And I went to see, when I was about 19, I went to the Sensations exhibition, which was set by Saatchi and Saatchi in London. And it was basically an exhibition of the most shocking art around. And there was quite a few of Damien Hirst pieces in there, but there was loads of other kind of equally or much more shocking pieces of art in there as well. And one of them, which was basically surrounded by security guards, was this one, which was basically a painting of Myra Hindley, and it was done. These are all children's handprints, and they basically got 100 children to come along and, with the help of an artist, paint a picture of Myra Hindley's face. And this was like really, like, had huge impact. Not just the fact it was her in, and this thing was about 25 foot wide on the wall of this exhibition hall, and it was set so you walked into the exhibition and looked down the corridor, and it was immediately in front of you. So it was not only the fact that it was her, but it was also the fact that the way they had done it with the children's hands was like really, really shocking. So it had security guards around there, because there had been loads of attempts for people to come and splash paint on it and stuff. So I think art really creates shock, and obviously that kind of hit home a message as well. You know, there was a message behind that whole concept. Not just it wasn't just there to shock. There was meaning behind it. So also in shock comes advertising. That's obviously a big part of shock. And when you think of shock, there's actually there's a whole thought or type of advertising called shockvertising, which is basically adverts that are designed to shock in order to sell brands and in order to sell products and raise awareness and create notoriety around things. So a couple of really kind of key examples that I found of this is Peter. So obviously Peter have been doing shock advertising for years. They've got a whole string of kind of adverts behind them which have been designed to shock people into stopping out animal cruelty, basically. And they do it by using people who are well-known people like Shirley Manson, who are also really dedicated supporters of the cause, to take part in photographs that shock, but kind of shock with a bit of a quirkiness to it as well, and can make you giggle a bit, apart from the mink one. So they've kind of really hit on what they want to do. That's the way they want to raise awareness, and shock really helps them do that. Another company that uses shock is Benetton. So, colours of Benetton. But I found this quote from the founder, which basically, we did not create our advertisements in order to provoke, but to make people talk and to develop citizen consciousness. So they really focus at Benetton in creating stories out of their images and their adverts that get people to talk about them and to raise awareness of political issues. They're like a massively political company. So they virtually never, or I couldn't find any examples where they'd actually use their clothes in their advertising. They always use an image which is designed to shock. So a couple of examples of these is this one, and the kind of initial message that you get behind this is that it's a united colours Benetton, bringing people of all races and creeds together. But there's kind of quite a few hidden meanings in it. You've got the kind of angelic blonde-haired white girl with a big gritty smile on her face, and then you've got the black girl who's kind of got these devil horns in their ears and showing absolutely no smile at all. So there was initial concept was bring people together, but then there's a theory of good and bad behind it as well, which is designed to create stir. This is another picture or another advert used by Benetton. So this is basically the actual uniform of a Bosnian War veteran who died in conflict, and it was at the height of the Bosnian War, and it's got his blood and bullet holes in it, and they got hold of it and they took pictures of it, and that was the advert basically, and it was kind of relating it to clothes. It's the only image that they've done that featured clothes as the only thing on there, but it's not their clothes, it's his clothes, and it's really bringing home the fact of the impact of the Bosnian War at the time. And the last one I've got for Benetton is this one. And if you're a parent, you know that's not really a shocking image. It's like the most normal image in the world. It's a natural image. So I got kind of, when I first saw it and I hadn't read up on it, I wondered why it had been included as a real shocking image. But it was actually used as part of the height of the AIDS campaign that they were doing, an anti-AIDS campaign in the early 90s. And it was basically talking about the number of babies born every year with AIDS, and they were then incurable, basically. And the angle of the photograph and the fact that she's being held in that position was to depict basically being taken straight from the womb to the grave, to show what would be that baby's life, basically, in front of her. So that was, again, something that was deemed initially to be quite normal and natural thing, to be something quite shocking. So then, other types of brands use shock this is going to go on much other brands have used shock to kind of sell adverts and sell their brands as well. Tango, if you remember this from the 90s, was a massive thing when it came to shock. And does everyone remember the Tango ads? Yep. Right, I've got two to show you, so I just thought I'd play them and then we can talk about it. So this is the first one. Hopefully the speaker will work.
Lord, surely I think we might use a video replay here. Soon around it, let's do it. Oh, yes, we could be in for it. Witnessing the Jungle sensation here. Oh, yes, good. Let's look again.
Yes, Ralph, the big orange fellow running from the left, and he gives him a good old slapping.
It just illustrates the bite and buzz. Oh, Jungle.
Yes, Ralph, super potato station, smashing drink, no. You know, you can Tango.
So that advert did absolute wonders for Tango. It like made them a household name, even though they were quite well known before that. It really put them on the kind of height of advertising at the time. It got a lot of people talking, just because it was quite a funny advert and there was a bit of slapping involved. But it was what happened after that kind of really made it work for them. And the fact that it got banned because basically people in every school in the country would just go up to their mates and happy slapping them. And it wasn't the fact that they were slapping them on the face, but they were kind of missing and hitting their ears. And like 15 or 16 school kids went partly deaf because they've burst eardrums. So they banned the advert because of that. But that just made it all the more notorious, and everyone wanted to see it. And obviously there was no YouTube at the time, so they couldn't just go online and find it. So there was rumours of like copies of it going around and all sorts of weird stuff. But it got talked about really well. And Tango realised that using that shock or using the aftershock of an advert could really help their brand. So they followed it with a series of adverts, and some of them they purposely designed to get televised so they weren't too shocking, and then other ones they commissioned which they knew would get banned, which they knew would give kind of notoriety. So this is another one. This is one that didn't ever get shown.
It's just an extreme towards worse. There's the key to the whole fruit. Oh, I'm full of juice, Mum. Put up my gym jams and go.
Yeah, so that obviously used the kind of emotive idea of animal death and cruelty and stuff to sell a soft drink. But I don't think they even tried to get it put on TV. It just got instantly banned by the regulators. But it means they made it onto YouTube, and now it's got millions of views. So they used shock even though they knew it would never get out there. It was like an underhand way of doing it. So on from kind of TV is film. So my wife is a much bigger horror fan than I am, but I've been with her for 14 years, so I've kind of got a lot of horror stuff off her. So I know quite a bit about horror now off the back of her talking about it all the time. The horror genre in film is worth like $1 billion or something. Yeah, $1 billion a year, and it creates. It kind of brings audiences of a very particular type, people who love to be scared and love to be shocked and love to be kind of see weird and wonderful things on screen. And there's obviously certain times of the year where it's really prevalent. So around now, Halloween is like there's loads of horror films out, and that's generally the same every year. You get quite an influx of horror films where people see it as a bit of an experience, like let's go to the cinema and be shocked. So this has been going on for years, obviously, and a couple of examples are obviously Blair Witch Project. So I looked at the marketing for the Blair Witch Project, and it was really interesting because what they did was really they super hyped it. Basically, it was a really cheaply made film, maybe made by 3 students. It cost like 20 grand to make it. They hired the video equipment for it and all that sort of stuff. But when it got signed by a film distribution company, they put loads of money into the marketing, and they created visuals about this is the most shocking movie of all time, and lines that really told people exactly what it was, a really shocking thing. And they put images like this out and they had videos of the audience reaction to it, and they played those as TV adverts for the film. So they didn't show any clips of the film, they just showed the audience reaction. But it was really weird because I remember going to see it in the cinema. I remember feeling like completely, like not in any way scared or freaked out by it. And I think that was partly to do with the build-up it had and the marketing that it had behind it. That people almost went there expecting to be so horrified, but actually when they weren't horrified, they kind of felt a bit numb at the end of it. So that it kind of made me think about the way other films are prepared. So another film that was out a couple of years ago, obviously quite a few years ago, was The Ring, and it's a remake of a Japanese film, but I'd never heard of it before, and this was a real personal experience for me. I'd never heard of The Ring, and they didn't put out a TV advert with any of the footage of the filming. Nothing about the film came out before the film came out. This was the poster, so it gave nothing away about what the film was about. And if you'd never seen the Japanese original, you'd have no idea what it's about. And I'm not particularly easily freaked out or scared, or I don't find things particularly shocking. But when this scene came on the massive screen in front of me on the cinema, I was absolutely terrified, and it kind of freaked me out for a long time. And I think it was just the whole slowness of it and build-up. And it just, and the whole audience, you could feel that the whole audience was getting really freaked out. But that was mostly to do with the fact that they didn't build it up or show any footage or tell you what it was going to be. It just appeared and it was on the screen. And this is quite a long way into the film. So I think suspense is such a big part of creating shock, and you need that suspense in order to in order to create the impact. I move on. So a couple of other films that are kind of remain shocking throughout the years is sorry, I had to throw my freaking mic right. So a couple of films that have remained really shocking throughout the years is Nightmare on Elm Street. So the fact that it's based around a kind of paedophilia, because he was a paedophile, and then he was then burned to death by his village, his town folk, and then came back to haunt the dreams of children. It's something that people can relate to from the nightmare point of view. Everyone has nightmares as children, and this idea of a man coming back repeatedly overnight and to terrify you in your dreams is something that can kind of really stick with you, and it's got some scenes in it which even today are pretty horrifying. The Exorcist is another film which hasn't aged well, or which has aged really well as far as shock value goes. If you watch it now, it still feels pretty uncomfortable to watch. There's some pretty horrible scenes in it, and just mainly the fact that it's the behaviour of such a young girl who turns into literally a demon kind of really sticks with you when you watch it, and you can kind of relate to what behaviour of a young girl is meant to be. Keep your kids over there.
Yeah, I keep it over.
And then there's The Shining. So the story, and this is like on the other end. It's not particularly gory or brutal to watch, but to see the behaviour change of a guy who's obviously being driven insane in a hotel along with his family, and the fact that there's so many question marks over the story and what it's meant to be, and he basically just goes nuts and tries to kill everyone. But his portrayal of that character is like really shocking to watch, just because of the kind of anger and the pent-up aggression that he's got within him. But it made me think about what shock does over time, and these have stood the test of time really well. But generally, films don't stand the test of time. So this was one of the first depictions of horror in cinema in 1931, which is the first Dracula film, and when it was first shown, like, it terrified audiences. People would have been never seen anything like it, and it would have been absolutely horrendous to watch. But if you watch it now, it just feels so lame and so kind of, it is in no way shocking or frightening. But that's just because we've just become conditioned to accept shock, and it's just a normal thing now. And this kind of goes along with all of the films of the time. So this is Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954, and again, this just the fact that the makeup is obviously so prosthetic, and it's just not very kind of shocking now. But back then it was really shocking, and it created a huge stir. And that kind of led me on to Night of the Living Dead, which is the first proper zombie movie. And it was in 1968, and it only cost a kind of fraction of what today's movies cost, $100,000 or something, by George A. Romero. And it was the first time that zombies had been depicted on the big screen. And the main zombie in it looked like this. And it kind of made me think about how far we've had to come in order to create any type of shock value in these sorts of films. So zombie films now are far more brutal and far more shocking than they ever were before, and this is where it started. But this absolutely terrified audiences. This guy's depiction of what a zombie was horrific. So now we've gone all the way to the other extreme with things like The Walking Dead, and this is now for TV rather than film. But not just the prosthetics. It's not just because the prosthetics are better and the makeup's better, but the audience needs this type of thing in order to have any reaction or shock. Otherwise, they'll just be left thinking that was very lame. And that's another guy. But it also works with computer games. This is the first one of the first kind of first-person shoot 'em ups, Wolfenstein 3D from 1992, and this was like walking around with a gun shooting people, and at the time that was like not shocking, but it was quite different to what had been around previously, and it really engaged kind of the gaming community. But that's had to be pushed much further than where it started in order to gain kind of following and gain the love of games. So and that goes all the way through to Doom 4, which is out next year, and that's just kind of it's a lot more gruesome and gory than any of the originals, and they've had to make it that way in order to become the franchises that they are. Same goes for Grand Theft Auto. This was the first Grand Theft Auto, came out in '97, which doesn't feel very long ago. But the premise of the game is still the same. Run around kind of robbing banks and shooting people. But over the years, they've just had to, as the technology's come, they've been able to, but they've also had to push the boundaries and push it further through to the latest one, which is obviously a lot more graphic and puts the person really at the heart of the game, which is basically killing people. As shock, as things go on, shock becomes much more important and much more visual and has much more impact. But it also works in the other way as well. It works in reverse. Things that were deemed to be totally normal when they were first made can become shocking over time. So here's some examples, and this happens mostly in advertising. So here's some examples of some adverts that have come. Were set out as being completely normal adverts. They weren't intended to shock, but as time has gone on, they've become shocking just because they're no longer politically correct, or they just seem plain wrong. Here's an advert for Camel cigarettes, and with the strapline, "More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette." And that was like a brilliant sales strategy for Camel at the time. It must have been showing the doctors are the main guys in the town, and they smoke our cigarettes. That's great. So, but obviously now that's kind of you wouldn't believe that adverts like that have existed. I quite particularly like this bit, which is the T zone, which is T for taste, T for throat, and it's basically saying that they taste nice and they're good on your throat. It's probably unlikely. Then there's these two by Coca-Cola and 7-Up. And they're basically saying we want our drinkers of 7-Up and Coca-Cola to start as young as possible, which is obviously massively frowned upon now. And can you imagine like a baby drinking a bottle of 7-Up these days? People would be throwing things at you. So, but that wasn't anything wrong with that when that came out. So it was a totally normal advert. This is another one that was out quite a few years ago, which with that line, because innocence is sexy, I think. Again, there's deemed nothing wrong with this advert when it was brought out, but over time, as we've become more sensitive to the issues, the things that they were trying to use as a sales technique, it's become more and more shocking. VW have always been famed for their really brilliant advertising. They've always used a really great photograph with some cleverly written copy. So here we've got a bashed up VW, and the copy basically says, "Sooner or later, your wife will drive home one of the best reasons for owning a Volkswagen." Basically, the small copy I'll summarise says that every part of a Volkswagen is replaceable, so it doesn't matter how many times your wife bashes into stuff, you'll be able to just replace it. I particularly like the first line, which is, "Women are soft and gentle, but they hit things." But that was totally normal, absolutely fine. Along the same routes to sexism is Christmas morning she'll be happily with a Hoover, and then the chef does everything but cook. That's what wives are for. And that was a perfectly normal message to read in a Reader's Digest probably magazine, and that would have been having people buying chefs at the rate of knots. But totally normal when it was made, becomes shocking over time just because it's so wrong. This next advert is the first official advert for Fairy washing up liquid and for Fairy soap, and it's something that again wasn't seen as a bad thing then, but is completely shocking that this was ever made now. And basically, the line is, "Why doesn't your mama wash you with fairy soap?" Which is unbelievable that sort of advert ever got made or ever got published. But there was nothing wrong with it when it was made, and it was just a painting, presumably a painting, and they may have painted the bar soap into the painting. But yeah, so it kind of works in the opposite direction as well. So I'm just going to finish by really quickly summarising how this was a bit of a weird connection, because we don't do shock work in our business. We don't really have the opportunity to do work that is deemed shocking. So I try to think about how you can use shock to kind of work into your process and into your work and to sell things, basically. So I started to think back to the description I came up with for shock, especially the first bit, which is doing something outside the expected. So we're a design agency. We sell brands and websites and that sort of stuff. So you don't really get the opportunity to use like terrible, horrific imagery that shocks people, but you do get the opportunity to change people's opinions and to come at things from a different angle. And quite often we have clients that come to us and they say, "I know what I want. We have this product that I need to sell, or we do this service and we need to sell, and we need a new logo, or we don't need a new logo, but we need a new advertising campaign and we need a new website." And that's basically the first conversation that we have with most clients is, we need this. And what we find is that actually they don't really know what they need at that point, usually, unless they've done a lot of research to kind of back it up. So we kind of come from the angle of, well, let's do research and let's find out what you really need, and then we can tell you what you need based on our experience and what we do as a job. We had this experience with a company called Digital Profile, who a kind of local startup, changing the kind of way people in the digital and creative industry get into work. And they came to us with exactly that type of brief. We need a brand and a website and a look and feel that is this type of thing. So they showed us things that they really liked, and they showed us kind of really, really normal, everyday website and brand work that you see all the time on every website, big image, huge type, all of that sort of stuff. And they really like this sort of stuff, and this was their kind of brief to us, is this is what we want. So they showed us examples of things they like, so really clean websites and kind of big typography and really, really clean and crisp, and kind of all the usual suspects really of really nice design. But they were kind of telling us what they wanted, so we felt it was important that we did our research and we went back to them what we think they should have in order to do the job that we're trying to do, which is make them stand out. So we went back to them and said, what does the design industry, this is aimed at designers and developers and techies, what do they like? What do they engage with? What do they find fun? And we looked back at some of the stuff that had been done by MailChimp in MailChimp's early days, and that became such a kind of key point to it, was that designers and developers and techies love playful things. They love things that they can engage with. They love kind of cool, funky, silly, jokey stuff. So how can we build that into it? And how can we build really nice kind of stylistic illustration into it? So rather than coming up with something that was really photogenic and photographic and all of that, we came up with these series of characters and a brand that was a complete shock to them in that's kind of the link. Basically, when we presented to them and we said, this is what we think you should have, because they had such a fixed idea in their head of what they wanted, this was a million miles away from what they thought they were going to get. So it was a massive risk on our part, because we knew exactly that they weren't expecting this sort of thing. So when we presented these characters in all of their different kind of gazes, there was a kind of feeling of shock from them, because it's not what they were expecting. And that's generally a feeling we get a lot of the time. We've recently done a project where the brief was definitely not to change the logo. And by the time we'd done our research and did our first presentation, the first thing we said was, you've got to change your logo. And that was, to them, a shock, because they were like, oh, hang on, that's not what we briefed. But once we showed why we should change the logo, they kind of got it and they went with it. So yeah, so I think even if you don't do shocking work, or you don't get the opportunity to do work that shocks, I think just approaching things in a different angle and doing things your own way and not what the client expects can also kind of lead to shock on their behalf anyway. So that's pretty much it. Sorry.